Hilarie Cash now joins us from Seattle, where she is the Chief Clinical Officer and co-founder of Restart Life, a gaming addiction center. Hilarie, thank you very much for joining us. That story really kind of hit the nail on the head when you use terms like gambling element and the deep pockets of the gaming industry are going to fight against. As I understand it, you're of the opinion that this recognition is long overdue. And during a trip to China a decade ago, talked about gaming as an addiction all the way back then.
That's right.
Well, bring me up to date on what has happened in 10 years. Obviously, you think much more should have been done on this a lot sooner.
Yeah, I actually think that both China and South Korea at that time were well ahead of the curve and well ahead of us here in the United States, because the governments officially recognized it as a public health threat and took measures to try to educate the public, develop curriculum in the school systems, provide treatment for that. Especially, I thought South Korea did a pretty good job from what I could tell. And here in the United States, we've been very, very slow to respond to this. And of course, the gaming lobbyists are powerful. Those gaming companies are very powerful, so it's difficult. They are essentially creating the tide, and we're all flowing along with it. So it's not easy to turn the tide.
Yeah, and some of the research shows that some people, men and women, boys and girls, just don't have an off switch when it comes to gaming. What can this do long term?
Ask that last question again.
As I understand it, there are some people just don't have an off switch. So what does this do to both male and female people who are caught up in this addiction?
The kind of symptoms that we see with the clients who come into our treatment facility are that they are physically sleep deprived, deconditioned. They are often severely underweight or overweight. They're often very depressed. They're socially isolated and socially anxious. It is not unusual for them to actually be suicidally depressed. They're alienated from their families. They've failed out of college or stopped going to their high schools. These are the typical symptoms we're seeing.
Wow. We often think of perhaps teenage boys as being addicted to gaming, but this is a problem for females as well. In fact, I saw a study that indicated it would be a bigger problem, except teen girls aren't really targeted as much as boys, as males are.
Yeah, this is a big puzzle to us at Restart, because we actually get very, very few women coming to Restart, very few calls. In 10 years that we've been open, we've only had 8 or 9 women who've even come through the program. So the big question is why that is, and I do think that the games themselves are being designed by men and are more appealing to the male side of the population, but that may change over time. I also think that females tend to be more social and not willing to isolate themselves, and we know from research that the more isolated people become, the more depressed and anxious they become.
Let's take this from the aspect of a parent. How would a parent make the distinction between a child that is just kind of consumed with gaming, whether it's after school or for a short while, as opposed to a kid who's badly hooked and facing the kind of trouble that you discussed?
Well, I think what parents need to understand is that for children to develop in a really healthy way, they need to be physically active and socially active, not online, but face-to-face with friends and family. They need to develop a sense of their own willingness to share responsibilities for the household chores. They need to get their homework done. It's a healthy, balanced life when a child can do all of those things. Once a child prefers to spend their time video gaming rather than doing all of those things I've just described, and they're resisting parental efforts to set limits, healthy and appropriate limits on gaming time, that's when you're looking at a problem.
Hilarie Cash, very sobering. Thank you very much for bringing us up to date.